Originally, my parents started off coming to Australia because my father got a job in weapons research, and then we went, like all migrants do, we went to some migrant camp, like hostages, and then we lived in Elizabeth South. Like a lot of migrants came to South Australia, and then my parents then decided they were going to make money by going and working in Woomera. And so that we moved to Woomera. Can you believe that? We came to Australia, and I was only a little kid, and we were in this place in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
And then my mother and father, my father worked at weapons research, but he ended up working for the Americans on the Firestone rockets, and was on the base that would put the first Australian satellite up. And we still got the firing pin. My mother still has the firing pin that you have to pull out before the rocket's launched. So that was crazy. But we lived in Adelaide. Eventually they came back to Adelaide. They built a new house, and then they moved to another house. And I just lived in South Australia for years and years and years. Then moved around a bit. I went to Victoria for a while, Melbourne for work for a while.
Because you said 18, you went up to Darwin to do that job.
Yeah, yep. I got a job in South Australia with the PMG's department as an apprentice.
Yeah.
I did a whole electrical fitter mechanic apprenticeship, and then travelled up the Northern Territory. So when I was 18, I was the leader. So crazy. And it was, like I said, it was just after the cyclone. So it started in Alice Springs. So the whole trip was, you took the truck up to Port Augusta, you got on the train. Like, I had to put the truck on the train with this other guy, and he wasn't much older than me. And then we just caught the GAN to Alice Springs, and then we started there at each of the telephone exchanges and work your way right up Katherine, Tennant Creek, all of those sort of places. And then we got to Darwin, and then we had to do some work up there, but there wasn't, it was mainly reporting on what was left. And we also did some work. We went to Milingimbi and Mummalari, which were troposcan sites in the Northern Territory. They beam the radio signals up to the troposphere, bounce the signals off the troposphere back down to an area. So that's how the telephone communications were for remote communities, and we had to do work at those as well. So
how long were you up doing that sort of work?
Maybe 4 months. So it's pretty crazy when I think about it, like an 18-year-old in charge.
Yeah.
Going up.
Not happen as much these days.
No, I don't think so. But I learnt a lot, and I guess that was my career, really. I stayed in what became telecom. After that, it split up, and I went with telecom, and we did just continue to work there. But I went back. I was an apprentice electrician and fitter and mechanic, but then I obviously qualified as a tradesperson. But then I went back to college and studied a diploma in electronic engineering, because I wanted to be what they call a technical officer, which is a paraprofessional. So I went back for years studying, and then finally got a job as a technical officer, like in the office. And like that was all planning and estimating jobs and all that sort of stuff.
And then from there you went to Ozpost with the sorting machines? Or was there
There was a period I wanted to, when you become a grade 1 technical officer, but I wanted to get to the next level. And I had this great plan about moving from Adelaide to Melbourne, allowing the price of houses go up in Melbourne, then come back with more money and buy a house. That was a great plan. But anyway, I went to Melbourne and worked in the Department of Housing Construction as a sort of the next grade up technical officer. grade 2. And that was in a research laboratory where we did testing of fire alarm equipment to make sure it met the Australian government specifications and all that sort of thing. And then that section was in Port Melbourne. And so I did work there with all these crazy scientists. And I was actually asked to go to Antarctica, but I said, I'll go there for a couple of months, but they said, no, you have to go for 6 months. And I said, I'm not sure about that. So I didn't really go, but which I still regret, because it was to go and calibrate instruments on the ice. They do the holes in the ice and they put sensors down in the ice.
How old would you have been about that time?
Probably about 25, I think, 25 or 26 was when I did that. Yeah, so that was interesting. But anyway, there was a few years in Melbourne, and I didn't really like Melbourne because I came from Adelaide where the beaches were much better. So in Melbourne, every time it got hot, there's like a traffic jam to the beaches. So I gave up with that idea. So I moved back to Adelaide, luckily, and got a job with Australia Post. And strangely enough, it was in a building that had replaced the building I was when I was an apprentice, like the exact same spot. I got a job as a technical training officer. And it was all part of Australia Post's vision to bring in new technology. They wanted to bring people in that had more experience in that sort of area. And so I got a job there, which was really lucky. It was the best job I ever had in my life because I was involved in everything new. So they brought in new sorting equipment and I was always part of that, either installing it, teaching the people there about how it worked. So I got sent to Sydney, to Melbourne on training courses, then I'd bring that course back and teach it to the technicians in Adelaide. And then eventually they decided to buy what's called optical character recognition machines, which are sorting machines that read the mail, the handwriting on the mail. And they were German machines, but they decided to send us to America to learn about them. So I went to America for 3 months in a training school in Oklahoma to learn about German equipment. Amazing. You wouldn't think that you'd get a job in Adelaide as a technician in a mail centre, which was basically all hand sorting, and I ended up working going to America and learning about all this equipment, and then came back to South Australia, and we had to put together all these courses to teach all the technicians on these newer pieces of equipment. And then we worked with the Germans to install them. And then the same thing happened with some Japanese machines. So I met all these Japanese people that I worked with. And then we had French people. So I worked with French people. It was crazy. It's like, you wouldn't believe it, really. And I couldn't believe that I'd applied for this job in Australia Post, which you thought was just sorting letters. And I'd say, I'm in engineering, and everyone would say, what do you repair the bush bikes? I said, no. And yeah, it was great. Unfortunately, we installed lots of equipment, parcel sorting machines, cameras, everything. I don't know, I was involved in a lot of stuff. But in the end, what happened was that the internet came in and started to cut down the letter volumes. So that was getting towards the end of my career when I could see things were not going well financially, and the job became worse because they just get you to do things that you really don't want to do, that you're not really interested in. So that's eventually I decided I'd had enough. That's it, I'm leaving. So that was a career. But intertwined with all that was this desire to generate my own energy at home. And that's how I got to all this electrify everything, was I had all the background in all of that type of equipment and I could see the advantages of it. And So it's been like a life's journey towards that
So you
goal of electrify everything.
So you started in Adelaide, you renovated in Adelaide,
Yep.
electrified everything in that house in Adelaide?
No, not in that one. The house in Adelaide, basically there were no solar panels back when my first house was in the late 70s, and it was an old rundown house, and I renovated it and put a hot water system in, and that was about it. But it was like at that moment I realised that if you could generate your own power, then it's going to be a lot cheaper. Because the experience with the solar hot water system was that my bills just dropped away to nothing, and it allowed us to get extra money to do other things for the renovation. And it was like a light bulb moment. This could work, like this feeling of freedom that you were away from all these people trying to take money off of you. Anyway, that was the experience. When I moved to Melbourne, I didn't really do much because it was just all work. I had a house in Melbourne. Then I came back to Adelaide, bought a house. Didn't really do a lot then, but all of that was with a previous partner. And then unfortunately we separated, and there was a couple of lost years, and that's when I met Tomoko. And I still had all these desires for carry on with this theme, and when I met Tomoko, she was of a similar mindset, particularly because her farmer was an organic farmer and all those sort of things. So we made this plan to get together and build a Japanese house by the sea and try and make it as efficient as we can, because Japanese houses, they're really very good at multi-function rooms. So like in a Japanese house where you sleep, you pack your beds away and you can use that room for something else. And going to Japan, because I went to Japan to see Tomoko's parents and all that sort of stuff. Just the new technology, you could see what was happening. We bought a little tiny house in the sandhills in Aldinga in the scrub, and it was just a transportable, because I didn't have much money at that stage, because a lot of people know, if you separate, you end up half or less than half of what you originally had. So we had this sort of house in the scrub, and we had to strip it all back to the timber and then change it to a Japanese style and build onto it. But as part of that, what we found was that the original transportable house just had a instantaneous electric heater. It cost a fortune to run. I was just shocked how much it cost to run this little electric heater. So the first thing I did was put a solar hot water system on the roof, and it saved us a fortune. It just instantly.
How quickly did it return the money that you would have paid?
I only paid $2,000 for it. It was a show special for a Beasley solar hot water system.
Yeah.
And it probably within maybe 2 years, it paid for itself.
Yeah.
And it's still going today, like maybe 13 years later. It's still working.
So the return on investment is huge.
Huge. It was huge, yeah. But doing that taught us, and also like building the house, completely insulating it. And the other thing I learned from doing a course on renewable energy was orientation of the house to the north, was changing the house so that most of the glass faced north to use the heat from the sun to heat the house. So we did that, and we also put in a wetback system with a wood fire to heat up the water. And that was in the Aldinga house. And then we started through renewable energy. I learned about solar panels and all the rest of it. And then we were the first in the street to put solar panels on our house. was only a 1 kilowatt system. It covered most of the roof, but it paid us back that we ended up not paying any electricity bills because the government at the time gave us, $8,000 towards the solar system. So we had to fork up, I think it was $12,000 for a 1 kilowatt system, but we only paid $4,000. And then we got 50 cents a kilowatt hour back from the government to incentivise people to put in solar panels. So we ended up paying nothing. We were making money on a 1 kilowatt system. And we weren't paying anything for electricity, nothing. When we left that house, we eventually left and moved to Tasmania. When we left that house, they gave us a cheque for $300. So that even paid for itself. And I guess the lesson was that if you do those things, insulate, put on solar hot water, all of those type of things, that money comes back to you. It comes back to you. And all the other things don't matter. You can buy lounge suites and things. They're waste of money because no one's interested in giving any money for that afterwards. But that was a big lesson for us. But we shifted from Adelaide to Tasmania because of the heat problems. That's the main thing.
You were talking about you had a week or two of 40 degrees in Adelaide and just
everything. We spent a lot of time building up, because some of your biggest costs are food. If you can grow your own food, I think we worked out it was costing us about 16 grand a year for food. And that was our biggest cost because we weren't paying anything for electricity. So we thought that's an area we really need to work on. And that was one of the moves to Tasmania, was if we could buy a block of land where we could grow food as well as do all these other electric things, then that's what saves you money in the end. And that's what we've done. And luckily I've got a good partner. Tomoko's a very good grower. As I said, her father was an organic farmer. So he taught Tomoko a lot about growing things. So she was really keen to grow a lot of things. So that's why we moved to Tasmania and bought a block that we could do all those things we've learned. And through that, we've built this house that we're in now, that we've gone fully electric car, solar system. We've got a wetback system where we haven't quite connected it yet, but we've got a heat pump system. The solar runs, we don't pay anything for hot water. So we learnt all those lessons.
And the driver behind that is obviously partly the cost savings and the actual return, and also partly environmental. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, we're quite strong environmentalists. We believe in acting on climate change. But I think the key to solving those problems is that people get a financial return out of it. If it's financially viable for them to do it, to actually pull all these things in, and it saves them money, then you can protest all you like, but those sort of things really drive people, I think. And for us, it's been a game changer.
And you mentioned that you're a part of a group, the electrification group.
Yeah, I'm a supporter of Rewiring Australia, which I think they've got the right idea. It's about that philosophy that if you're saving money, then people are more likely to do it. And we do need to act on climate change because it's a really big problem. But there are solutions now. So over my career, I've seen the technology come in and things that you can do now that you could not do years and years ago.
Just going back to the solar system, 1 kilowatt that you had in Adelaide, and probably the solar systems these days are have a bit more oomph in them.
The solar system in Adelaide was 1 kilowatt, so it cost, the actual cost was $12,000, right? But luckily the government were giving money, so that was a good thing. But we hardly got any money for the solar system we put in here, 6.6 kilowatt. We got some sort of rebate, but not a heck of a lot. But that cost $6,000 for 6.6 kilowatts.
So the costs.
It's come down to less than $1 a kilowatt now these days.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you do it? It makes sense to me. So that's all part of our philosophy, is that we've taken advantage of those. We had a philosophy of not wasting our money on things that don't pay us back. So that I think I wrote a little story about it, that you should think about, is that thing I'm going to buy actually going to pay me back? And if it's not going to pay you back, do you really need it now? But the things that do pay you back, that's what you should be thinking about. That's always been our philosophy. So we've always lived with second-hand things and just put up with them. And then eventually, as we've got more money, then we could get better things. So it's all about that, buying things that pay you back. And I've had lots of people, when I first put in the solar in Adelaide, say, oh, I wouldn't buy those, they're a waste of money. They don't save you any money. And I'd say, when I bring the electricity bill in, say, show me your electricity bill. And they still wouldn't believe me. And they just waste their money on, I don't know, a new lounge suite or some new car that really they couldn't really afford. And I thought, why bother? It's like, why not do the things that can actually save you money, and then get the more luxury things once you've got to that point. So I think that's a philosophy that you need to work towards. There's a lot more people doing it these days, I think. Second-hand electric car, because there's no point in buying some of those really expensive ones at the moment, because they're probably never going to pay some of those people back that spend a lot of money on electric cars. And we've bought an electric car, but we bought the cheapest, longest range one we could get. When we went to Japan, and we lived in Japan for 6 months with our kids. Our kids went to school in Japan.
How many kids do you guys have?
Two kids, yeah. Our kids lived in Japan and went to school. But while we were there, we were actually, and this is a lesson for Australia, the house we were living in, no one wanted to buy it. We got a house for free. We went to Japan, and the people were just so happy that someone was living in their house and looking after it, that they were happy to let us stay there for nothing. But we paid them, because we thought, oh, we're using electricity and less council rates and all those sort of things. But the house was like a really good house, and it was worth less than $40,000 in Japan. But at the same time we were living there, that's when we first discovered electric vehicles, because Nissan, the Nissan Leaf, the Nissan company, they had a promotion where you could use an electric car for 2 weeks on a trial just to see what you thought of it. So we did that. So we used an electric car in Japan, and I thought, wow, these are pretty cool. But the first thing I realised about electric cars, you got to charge them at home, because the range wasn't that great in those days. I think it was 270 kilometres or something like that. And as soon as you turn the air conditioner on, it didn't even get that range. And then you're always looking for a charging spot. That was the first thing that they asked me when we gave the car back. They said, what do you think? And I said, you need a charger at home. I can't see it working any other way. And that was the case with the electric cars. You really need to charge it at home from solar panels to make it worthwhile. And we've done that here as part of our Electrify Everything. We've got a hub that we charge the car at home. And so we charge it off peak, and it costs us, I think, in total, we're saving about, we lived up at another house in Quamby Bluff for a while, in the mountains, and we were off grid, but we were paying a lot for petrol. I think we were spending nearly, like a lot of people, about $4,000 a year on fuel when we added it up, for all the little journeys for kids that you do and to the sports and whatever it is. But now we've shifted closer to all of our facilities, and we bought an electric car. We're paying a lot less than that, about 10% of that. So if we were $4,000 we were paying, we're only paying $400 now with an electric car. because we're charging at home. There's a big saving, And that car, because it was cheap enough, will probably recover a fair bit of the costs that we've got. I think that particular car's got a 10-year warranty, and the battery's 8 years or something like that. So if you work it out, that's a lot of saving in fuel. So that's probably going to pay us back, I'd say.